And over to you, Dom. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for a lovely introduction. And it is a real pleasure to be speaking with you all today. And I am delighted that I get to speak with Mariya, who is going to look at the OJS systems with you. So I'm going to speak for the first 10 minutes, and then I'm going to hand over. I am going to talk to you today about why you should index your journals in DOAJ, why you should send us article metadata if it isn't something that you are doing already. I'm going to give a quick preview of the publisher dashboard, which is where anyone who has a journal in DOAJ can look at their sort of holdings, as it were. And then my last slide, I'm going to very briefly talk about all the wonderful things that we do with PKP and have been doing for many years. So first of all, why index your journals in DOAJ? Well, as some of you may know, DOAJ has been around for 22 plus years. We are well established, and over that time, our criteria have become a sort of global standard for open access journals. So having your journal indexed in DOAJ shows that your journal meets good publishing standards. If you upload your article content to DOAJ, then you are really increasing the discoverability of your journal and its content, because all of our metadata is available for free and is collected by search engines and discovery solutions and aggregators, and it's sent all over the world. So it's one of the services that we're perhaps most proud of. We have had evidence from journals indexed in DOAJ already that having their journal in DOAJ has helped to widen their audience. So they have attracted authors and readers both domestically and globally, which is really important for the survival of a journal. And through that, they've been able to enhance their reputation and their sort of impact on both their communities, their academic communities, but also their local and global communities. And one of the things that we're most proud of is that we accept journals in any language, in any discipline, from any country. And that is less seldom seen, I think, with other indexing services. And finally, we know we understand the value and importance of being indexed in DOAJ because other organizations have told us. So, for example, in South Africa, the Department of Higher Education and Training includes DOAJ indexing, that they have a list of DOAJ index journals that they use. And I'll come back to this later on. Just to really prove how inclusive DOAJ is compared to some of the, or two of the other more sort of commonly known and popular indexes, this is a piece of research that we did in 2023, which proves that DOAJ indexes far more journals, open access journals, than you will find in either Web of Science or Scopus. And this is fantastic for DOAJ and for the open access community, for the global open access community of journals. It also points to a problem because very many research projects that are studying scholarly communications or scientific publishing, or even the progress of open access, tend to focus on Web of Science and Scopus. And so, you know, the fact that there are 9,900 journals back in 2023 that weren't indexed in Web of Science or Scopus really shows that DOAJ has a very important place in this sphere. We will be redoing this research this year, so look out for an updated blog post from us. So once your journal's indexed in DOAJ, why should you send us your article metadata? Well, as I mentioned earlier, any metadata in DOAJ is available for free, and we make it available in different formats so that it can be collected, it can be reused, it can be disseminated all around the world. And we have very good working relationships with discovery services OpenAlex, lots of people talking about OpenAlex at the moment. We have a great collaboration with them. And I actually gave a webinar with them earlier this year about that collaboration. We have a great collaboration with ProQuest, EBSCO, some of those more standard but commercial discovery services that you might find in university libraries. And then we've had a long-standing relationship with OCLC. And then there are lots of other different services that I've listed here on this bullet point. A more recent development is we're seeing loads of traffic come to DOAJ from AI solutions. The most prominent is ChatGPT, and we have an agreement with OpenAI about that, that they will use our metadata. Gemini is the Google solution, but we've also been approached by students, professors, academic organizations who want to use DOAJ metadata in their large language processing models and AI-based research projects, which is really exciting. When I say our metadata, this is, of course, your metadata. It's your article metadata, your journal metadata. We have collaborations with journal platforms. Here's two from Latin America, Redlick and Latindex, who we work very closely with, but there are other platforms sort of all over the world who we've been working with, slowly but surely trying to get as many of their journals indexed in DOAJ as possible. But then they take the metadata and use it to complement their own services. Of course, we work with search engines. Google, of course, I don't think that's much of a surprise. That is, of course, the world's most heavily used search engine. But we have other search engines as well that send us traffic. So we know that our metadata, your metadata, is crawled and picked up in those services. As well as South Africa that I mentioned earlier, we are present in other national funding tools such as Indonesia, Norway, Austria, and there are others. We have great working relationships with Korea, Japan. And then there are online tools that help you find journals to publish research in. There's one here in Europe called the Plan S Journal Checker tool, but there are others, some of them open source, like the Bison OA Journal Recommender. And then there are some that are proprietary, such as these services from Inago, Journ, Cronus Hub. So these are all services where you will find DOAJ metadata used very prominently. So that's why it's great if you can get your journal into DOAJ, which we will help you do, and then you start uploading your article metadata to us. If you have a journal in DOAJ, you might not know that you also have access to a publisher dashboard. And in that dashboard, you can upload new article metadata to us. You can correct existing article metadata. You can review and update your journal records. So if you see something in your journal record and it needs to be changed, that's where you can do it. And you can also come back to applications that you're in the process of submitting. They automatically save. You can go to your drafts and then you can review them, complete them, and submit them. So I'm just going to show you some screenshots from each of those areas now. This is our Upload Article XML tab in the Publisher dashboard. And you'll see that we currently accept 3 different flavors of XML, one which is our own DOAJ native XML, and then 2 different versions of the Crossref XML. And we hope to be adding more schemas as time goes on. The other important tab in the dashboard is where you can enter article metadata. Now, this is perhaps more suited to journals that don't publish as much. You may want to just come in here and enter the article metadata manually, but it's also a great form to know about, because if you want to correct or update article metadata that's already in DOAJ, if you see, then you can do it here. So if you need to add an author name or you need to change an affiliation, etc. The only things you can't do are change the full text URL or the DOI. And that's because we use those 2 pieces of information to match incoming data so that we can update existing article information instead of creating duplicates. A quick note about article metadata while I'm talking about it. in the DOAJ front end, that you can go and look at articles. We only use plain text display. So if you are a publisher and you are sending us formatting or HTML tagging or MathML, you won't actually see that in the article abstract or in the article title, which is where we most see these things on DOAJ. But importantly, we don't strip them out. So if you're sending us content that has tagging, you won't see it in DOAJ, but anyone that's collecting that article metadata will have it will have that tagging. So that tagging will be intact and will be displayed in services that are downstream from DOAJ. Also importantly, is I know that many OJS based journals send us article metadata in more than one language. At the moment, we can only randomly select languages. So if you send us an article abstract that has both Portuguese and English in it, then unfortunately at the moment, the way we ingest will randomly select articles. So if you want to control and keep the article metadata to one language, it's best at the moment if you only send us one language. We are working on both of these issues this year. We want to display article metadata more faithfully, and we want to support multilingual article metadata because we are huge admirers and supporters of the Helsinki initiative on multilingualism in scholarly communication, and we are in touch with them. If you want to see which journals you have indexed in DOAJ, then you have a My Journals tab, and this is where you can submit an update to us if you need to update the information. And then finally, this is where you see your draft applications, and you can edit or delete them. There is a page where you can get all this information about metadata, and this bit here that I've highlighted in red is I'm going to leave to Mariya to talk about in her half. This is my last slide. I just very quickly wanted to underline and stress how important the collaboration with PKP is. We've been involved with PKP on a collaborative level for many years. I'm an active member in the software support forum that PKP offers. We're working with PKP on lots of exciting projects. PKP is one of the founding partners of our Jasper project, which is for long-term digital preservation of journals that don't charge any fees. And we also support each other both in our marketing and social media activities. If you want to keep up to date with any information and developments, then you should go to our blog. That's where we post a lot of our news, but you could also send me an email. And that's all from me. I'm going to hand over to Mariya. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Dominic. Everyone, bear with me for a moment as I share my screen. And I hope it shouldn't be visible.
Yes.
Perfect. All right. Hi, everyone. As Dom said, my name is Mariya, and I'm with the Public Knowledge Project. And today, I will focus my session on how you can use open journal systems, our open source software for publishing, to help you get indexed in DOAJ and to help you deliver your articles to them. As Dom mentioned, it's a very good idea. I imagine a lot of you here know what PKP is and what OJS is, but just to recap, Public Knowledge Project is a nonprofit research and development initiative within Simon Fraser University in Canada. And it developed open source software for publishing, such as open journal systems, and it also has sister applications like Open Monograph Press and Open Preprint Server. And altogether, our software is used by over 52,000 journals globally as of 2023. So I assume since you are here at this webinar that you are using OJS or you're interested in OJS, but I would like you to put in the chat either an emoji that you can pick from the chat emoji list, or just type in how familiar you are with OJS. This is for my own curiosity, whether you will be already using it to publish your journals, whether you don't use it but are familiar with it, or whether you're not familiar at all. And I've already seen as part of people's introductions that several folks posted links to their OJS journals in the chat, which is really great. And thank you everyone for participating in this very informal survey. All right, so first I'm going to go over how you can use OJS to help with your DOAJ application. First of all, before you even apply, you should assess whether you're ready to go. And in order to assess, you will need to check DOAJ's basic criteria for inclusion and make sure you meet all of them. Here are some of the examples of those criteria. Your journal has to be online and fully open access. It has to have a confirmed journal title and an ISSN that corresponds to that title. It has to follow a quality control process for your peer review and publishing. Has to state copyright and licensing terms and your fees, even if you are not charging any. And your journal has to have published at least 5 research articles in the last year. And if you are new, or if you are coming to open access from previously being a subscription journal, then you should have a publishing history of more than 1 year, or at least 10 open access research articles. These are just some of the basic criteria. I suggest you check out all of them and make sure that you meet them before you start your application, because that way your efforts will be most rewarding. And by the way, I should mention that you will receive a copy of these slides, and for each slide, in the slide notes, I have links to all of the resources you need for related to the criteria I'm talking about on that specific slide. So don't worry about taking notes. All right, so sorry, I lost my mouse. I will go over some of the steps in the application process, and to guide us and to help us through this process, there are several very useful resources. First of all, there is DOAJ's own guide to applying. There's also DOAJ's application form, which you can access after you create an account on DOAJ's website. But if you don't want to go through every step of the form just for the sake of seeing the questions, you can also see them in the PDF form for reference only. And the main resource I'll be referencing today is PKP's application guide to DOAJ specifically for OJS journals. I will show it to you, and the link is also in the slide notes. It is structured in such a way that will tell you where in OJS you would need to put specific information that DOAJ expects. So I will go over a few of those questions from the form. So how do you prepare your OJS site? You will see in your DOAJ application that every question is accompanied with an extra field that asks you, where can we find this information? Please put the link to where we can find information about all of these things, your open access policy, your aim and scope, your editorial board, etc. So great news is that if you're using OJS, then a good portion of that requested information will be displayed on your journal homepage if you enter it in the settings. And I will highlight a few places where you can enter the information. This is not an exhaustive list, so I suggest that you just go through the guide step by step and make sure that you enter all of the fields, not just those in this presentation. And I will also be jumping out of my slides and showing you a few things on my demo journal, for which I'm using OJS version 3.3. So if you're using a different version, your settings might look a little different. So first of all, information about your journal and your publisher. This is the information that will go into your masthead under your journal settings. This is where you will enter your journal title and your publisher, your ISSN, etc. You will also want to enter your publisher details in your contact information, which will be displayed under your About the Journal page. Masthead is where you will enter a bulk of information about your journal. You can enter a little blurb and your editorial team, including their affiliations and titles. And then in journal description is the About the Journal page, where you can enter more specific details about your editorial policy, copyright policy, peer review process, etc. And I'm going to jump out to the front end page of the site to show you where it will appear. So About the Journal is a default page. It will appear under About. And if you're adding a lot of different information here, what I suggest is to designate sections to break it up and make it a little bit more obvious and readable. To do so, you can just add sections here. If you are comfortable working in HTML directly, you can also designate the headings right here in the HTML. There isn't really a hard and fast rule about all of this information having to be on the About the Journal page. This is an obvious place, but you can also add some of that in your sidebar or in your footer, as long as it's findable and as long as it's easy for you to point DOAJ to it. Now, a couple notes, one regarding multilingual journal titles. So if your journal title exists in more than one language, please don't add it all into the same English field or into the same one language field, because you can enable other language fields to add metadata there. So in this case, I have English title in the English field and the French title in the French field, and I can enable other multiple languages as well, as long as OJS has been translated to those languages. And another note about these two fields, the publisher and the ISSN. These fields are used in your internal exports, which means that they will be added to your metadata that gets exported to Crossref, to DOAJ, etc. But they do not automatically appear on your public website. So you should absolutely add them here, but in addition, you should also add them somewhere on the website. One of the common places where people usually add their ISSN is in the footer. You can also create a sidebar block and add your ISSN there. So I talked about that. Let's move on and talk about copyright and licensing. I know that this can be a big and intimidating topic. And in the slide notes for the slide, I have added a link to the PKP guide for copyright and licensing in OJS that I suggest you check out if you're new to copyright and if you need to set up licenses in your journal. And I have also added a link to a webinar recording that we did a couple of years ago about copyright and licensing in OJS, which I suggest you view, and it explains how it all works and how to set it up. But today I will just go over where to display your copyright statement and your license. So you probably know that in OJS, you have the settings under distribution license here that allow you to determine who is the copyright holder in the journal, which license it publishes under, which year to stamp on, and you can also add license terms here. So it's absolutely a good idea to have these settings in place, but this information is stamped on the article when the article is published. So for someone to see who the copyright holder is and what the license is, they will need to go to the article landing page and effectively see it displayed on the article. It's not very convenient if someone is just looking for a general information about what copyright policy the journal follows or what license the materials are published under. So for that, I suggest you additionally display your copyright statement in a few other places. One of those places could be your About page. You can have a section that outlines your copyright policy. Another place could be your author guidelines. And there is a place here for your copyright notice. So this copyright notice will be displayed to authors when they start a submission, then they will need to agree to this. And it will also be automatically displayed on your submissions page with all of the other information for authors. So it is right here. So we essentially have three places where you want to display your copyright. You want to have it on the article metadata, article landing page. You want to have it in your author guidelines right here. And you want to have it probably on your About page. Additionally, and ideally, you will also want to have your copyright and licensing information on the article gallery itself. So embedded in your PDF or HTML or XML. That way, someone who reads the article and downloads it and saves it on their computer still knows what license it was published under, whether they need permission, if they want to reuse some of that, etc. All right, moving on. Where would you display your peer review policy? It is important to clearly outline what quality control process the journal follows, including your peer review. So you will want to add the details of the review process, how many reviewers, how they get selected, invited, how long the review process takes, etc. So once again, you can add a summary of this on your About page, like so. If you want more or dedicated space for it, you can also create custom pages for your navigation menu, and each of these little sections can be its own custom page. It's really up to you. You can also add information to these sidebar blocks. So for example, here, information for readers, authors, and librarians is a boilerplate text that OJS comes with, but you can edit it. It all lives under setup information. So you can add information for authors about how their article will be reviewed. And finally, one more place where you may want to add this is in the description of each article section. So if you have multiple journal sections that follow different review processes, then you can add information about each section to the submission page. For example, you might have an original article section in which submissions are peer-reviewed, and then you might have a review section in which submissions are not peer-reviewed. So in order to summarize this information for each section, you will want to add it to the section description. Here under journal sections. And then this section policy will be displayed automatically on your submissions page right here, and will also be presented to the author who selects that section when they start their submission. I know I'm moving super fast through all of this, but all of this is in the slide descriptions and in the guides. So I hope that you will have time later to go over it at your own pace. All right, so these were just some of the examples of where you can enter information that DOAJ expects on its application. As I mentioned, that was not an exhaustive list. Those were just a few examples for the sake of the demonstration. And now I want to switch gears and talk about best practices. So in addition to meeting DOAJ's requirements for indexing, DOAJ also encourages you to consider a few best practices that are not mandatory for the application, and they have no bearing on whether your journal will be included, but they are a good idea to follow, and OJS makes them very easy, and that's why I thought I would mention them here. So first of all, your archiving policy, and not just the policy, but the actual long-term preservation of your journal, right? If your journal in the future stops publishing, if the publisher is no longer around, if your site is no longer around, you want to make sure that your content remains open and available to your readers. How can you achieve that? You will see that on the DOAJ application, there are several archiving solutions that you can select. And once again, these are best practices. This is not part of the requirements for the application, okay? But one of those solutions is PKP, and that stands for PKP Preservation Network. And this is something you have access to for free if you are using OJS. There are several prerequisites for that. So you need to have OJS version 3.1.2 or newer. You need to have an SSN entered under masthead, where I showed you. And you need to have published at least one issue. If you meet all those criteria, you can go and enable your PKP plugin. It lives under your plugin, under your list of plugins here. You will need to agree to a set of criteria, a set of conditions. And that's it. Your content will start getting preserved. And if you have previously published content, it will take several weeks for it to make its way into the preservation network, and all the new issues will be preserved after they get published. So I strongly encourage you to do that. It only takes a few moments, it only takes a few clicks, but it will really help you down the road if your journal ever stops publishing. And if you do that, in addition to enabling the plugin in the OJS backend, you will also want to display your archiving policy somewhere on your public website. Once again, it can be on your About page. It can be its own separate static page that you will link from your navigation menu. But effectively, you want to tell DOAJ and your readers and your potential authors that we have long-term preservation plans. We have plans for the future, and the content you publish with us will remain open and available into the future, even if the journal is no more. Another best practice that DOAJ recommends and that OJS supports is persistent identifiers. You are probably familiar with DOIs, digital object identifiers, which are persistent identifiers for articles. It means that they assign a link to each article that will not change if your journal moves, or if you unpublish, republish the article, if you move the article from one issue to another. And if you migrate to a different service provider or to a different domain, you can point that link to the new site so that the link remains the same and active, and all of your citations work. So OJS has an integration that allows you to generate these DOIs automatically and then to automatically register them with DOI registration agencies such as Crossref or DataCite. It does require you to have a membership with Crossref or DataCite, and you might already have access to that membership through your institution or through your library or through a consortium that you may be part of. If not, I also suggest that you check out the list of Crossref sponsoring agencies, and PKP is one of those sponsoring agencies, so it is possible that you might be able to get your DOIs for free if you belong to one of the countries identified on Crossref's list of sponsored countries. So do check it out. Another example of a persistent identifier is your ORCID. ORCID is an identifier for authors, and it allows to distinguish an author from one author from another author if they have the same name, or also to bring together all publications by the same author if their name changed in the course of their career. The ORCID plugin integrated into OJS allows you to display ORCID identifiers next to author names. And you can use it for free with ORCID's free API. But if you have ORCID membership, which might, once again, you might have through your library or through a local consortium, then you can also send article metadata to authors' ORCID records. And you can also send a record of performed reviews to reviewers' ORCID records. So that is supported by the ORCID membership. And finally, another example of a persistent identifier is a ROR, Research Organization Registry. It allows your authors to select their affiliation from a predetermined list in which each institution, and sometimes even a subdivision within an institution, has its own identifier, the ROR, which makes it much more consistent how authors declare their affiliations. All of these plugins are available within OJS. I encourage you to go check them out and take advantage of them. And finally, the last thing I'm going to talk about is how to send your metadata content, how to send your article metadata to DOAJ. This is something that Dominic talked about. He mentioned how important it is for you to send your articles to DOAJ after you have been accepted. And once again, OJS makes it very easy because it has a plugin. So in your tools, one scroll, under your tools, you will find your DOAJ export plugin, and you can use it in two different ways. After you have been accepted to DOAJ, you will have access to the site where you can find your DOAJ API key. So you enter it here, and then you check the checkbox that says OJS will deposit articles automatically to DOAJ. And usually this is the only thing you need to do. The deposit will happen automatically after your issue is published. And you can also double check under the articles tab that your articles have been deposited. The status here will change into deposited. Now, alternatively, if you don't want to do it automatically, or if something here doesn't work, you can also select the articles you want to deposit to DOAJ, click export. This will generate an XML file, and then you can upload it to DOAJ's site as Dominic showed us. So these are the two options, manual upload and export. And then to check how your articles are indexed in DOAJ, you can go to your journal's landing page on DOAJ, and under the articles tab, you will see how many articles are indexed. You can search them, you can filter them by the publication year. And this is a great idea to increase your articles' visibility and discoverability, and to make sure that other downstream services use them, as Dominic mentioned. So if you are hosting your OJS journal, or if your journal is hosted by your institution and you need additional support with any of these steps, if you have questions about DOAJ inclusion, if you have questions about your PKP archiving, about your exports, I encourage you to take advantage of our free PKP community forum. You can post a question, you can search similar questions that have been answered before. We have documentation on the Documentation Hub. We have free PKP school courses. And if you don't have the technical capacity to host yourself, or you want someone to take care of OJS hosting for you, you can go with a service provider, either in your region or with the service provider with the service that PKP provides for hosting journals. And finally, if you think we're doing a good job and you would like to get involved, we would welcome your involvement, and it doesn't have to be financial. PKP is a community-based organization. We would be nothing without community volunteers, and we would love for you to get involved and contribute a translation to OJS or to our documentation if we don't have one already. Improve our documentation through our wonderful documentation interest group. Collaborate on the PKP forum, answer questions from other community users if you know the answer, contribute to our software, attend our sprint, or become a sustainer. And with that, that's the end of my presentation. We can jump now to questions, and I'm going to stop sharing my slides.
Thank you so much, Mariya and Dom. It was excellent. We have some questions in the Q&A, and let's maybe start with them. And then we'll also have some in the chat, and thanks, Dom, for already answering some of them. So the first one is to Dom. Can you update information like the author name in the article metadata, especially in cases of changing an author name as a result of gender reassignment?
Yes, absolutely. One of the things that we have made sure with the DOAJ name metadata is that we have made it as open and generic as possible to fit any kind of name construction. So, so it's truly international. So we don't split between first name and family name or second name. And we also don't actually ask for a title field at all. So we've left it as open as possible. So names can be updated, can be added, removed as you wish.
Thanks a lot. Next question is from Bessem. When will you be able to upload marks XML metadata in DataSite schema in DOAJ?
Wow. I do not have an answer for that, but that is a really good question. The next one that we were looking at was JATS, because it's one of the more commonly used XML schemas. I know that there are other schemas. I'm not familiar with that one from DataSite, but I'm going to go away and do some homework, and I will see. I don't even know if it's is it for maths? Did you say maths, Irina, or
Mark XML?
Oh, Mark XML. Okay, I will go away and I will check that out. So we don't have plans just yet, but I now know about it. So thank you.
Thank you. Avani is asking, hi Dominic, thank you for the presentation. I have a query, if you may please guide. If a journal has been fully following open access guidelines established by global bodies and recognized by DOAJ since 2019, but it was officially indexed in DOAJ only in 2024. From which year should journal submit its metadata to DOAJ? From 2019, when the guidelines were adopted, or from 24, when the journal was indexed?
From 2019, as long as, which I think is what you're saying in your question, as long as that content meets it is true open access. So it hasn't just been made free, but it is open access with the correct kind of licensing. If you need if you have any need for specific information, then you can contact me, or you can contact our help desk, And I'll just put the email address for help desk in the chat.
Thanks a lot. And we have a question to Mariya. Hi, Mariya, from Fauci. We use OJS 3.4.0, and we already activate the PKP PN plugin. My question is how to make sure that our journal already indexed or preserved on the PKP PN.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question. So I will put a link in the chat to the PKP PN plugin guide, and it has a section that is called status. And in that section, it is explained how you can check the status of your preservation in 3 different sources. So for the first level is whether the plugin sent your information. The second level is the nightly list that PKP updates is a big CSV that you can download and check. But the ultimate and the final test that it has been preserved is whether your journal is in the keeper's registry. And that is the 3rd test. And it's all explained in the status. You can go and find your journal in all of those 3 places. Mind you, if you just recently started preserving your journal, if you just enabled PKP-PN recently, you need to give it a few weeks to pick up the previously published content. So if you're not seeing it yet, then please be patient. But if it's been a few weeks or even months and you are not seeing your content, then please post on the PKP forum, and our staff will be able to check the status for you.
Well, we also have some questions in the chat, and I'll start from the very end, and then we'll go up. So Raphael asked 2 questions. Does DOJ have a link with HL, where journals indexed in HL could help being indexed to DOAJ? I can say that we have regular meetings between DOAJ and HL in the context of collaboration for sustainable open access publishing in Africa project. So there is a link, and I don't know, Dom, if you want to add anything.
Yes, I mean you're right, Irina. We have great connections with HL, and actually there's a wider question there, which is, I think, if your journal is on a particular platform, does that increase the chances, or does it make it easier to get it indexed in DOAJ? And that's definitely something that we are looking at. I think what you saw from Mariya with the way that OJS makes you get all the information ready, that DOAJ compliance is built in. And I know that some other platforms are also doing that, and we have regular meetings with different platforms. So yes, I mean, I think obviously we still judge or we still review each journal based on its own merits, but the functionality of the platform that the journal on definitely helps.
Thank you for answering 2 questions already. The next one from Raphael is, how long does it take for DOAJ to assess a journal and take a decision? We send our application on February 17.
Raphael, you're going to have to be a little bit more patient. We have a turnaround time of about 3 months. So 3 months from the February the 17th. If you haven't heard, then do please send an email to the help desk email address that I sent. But we do try to turn everything around in less than 3 months.
Mm-hmm. There was a question from Sadok, and I guess it could be interpreted in 2 ways. So thank you, Mariya. Should all information description about the journal to be hosted in OJS be in English? So maybe this question is, does a journal need to be in English to use OJS? And the answer is no, a journal could be in any language. But if you meant, would it be good to also have information in English in addition to local journal? To local language of the journal, I guess it would be useful, but I don't know, Mariya, how you interpret this question, and if you want
I thought this question was about the DOAJ application. So should the information in OJS be in English for the sake of DOAJ application? And in this case, I would pass this over to Dominic, because DOAJ can support your journal information in many languages.
Yeah. And we will accept applications in any language. Unfortunately, for the moment, the application form itself is only in English. We hope to add French later this year, but you can submit information in any language. We have very few questions that have free text, actually. We have, I think, publisher name and any other organization that's connected to the journal. We're mostly looking for URLs, radio buttons, checkboxes. But so, certainly for the free text fields, any language is possible.
Yeah. Next question is, if a journal publishes articles online first without assigning them to an issue, is a DOAJ expert run twice, when the article is first published and when the entire issue is published?
If this question is about OJS, then in OJS, your articles will always be assigned to an issue, even if they are published online first. Now, how the DOAJ expert is run, that is a good question that I do not have an answer to. So I will need to go and double check that, whether it will run every time an article is published or whether it only runs when an issue is published. So as Dom said, let me go do my homework and I can get back to you on that. And if you're not sure, as I showed you, you can always go back to the article list in your DOAJ export plugin, and you can individually mark those articles and click deposit on them too. So if you want to trigger that deposit outside of the regular exports.
Thank you. Then the next question in the chat is not really DOAJ related, but it's OJS related. So maybe I'll read the question to Mariya because we hear it a lot. How do I activate auto deposit DOIs to Crossref?
Yeah, for sure. So depending on the version of OJS you use, if you use any version that is older than 3.4, then the process will be pretty much similar for all OJS 3 versions. So OJS 3, 3.1, 3.2, 3.3. OJS has 2 plugins. One of them is for DOI registration, and one of them is for Crossref registration. So I'm going to put a link to the guide in the chat. And you will need to set up both of those plugins. In your DOI plugin, you will enter your DOI prefix, and you will tell OJS how to create the suffix, to create it automatically from a pattern, etc. And then in your Crossref plugin, you will enter your Crossref credentials, which you will receive from Crossref when you become a member. And there is a checkbox very similar to the one I showed for DOAJ that says, deposit my articles automatically. You just need to check that checkbox, and every time your issue is published, your articles will be deposited to Crossref automatically. And you also have an option to manually trigger the deposit for each article that you select. So that is in broad strokes. I put the link to the guide so you can follow the guide. And if you have any questions, or if you run into any issues, please don't hesitate to search on the forum for answers or post on the forum if you don't find your answer.
Thank you. There is a question from Shahnish. In case a journal moves from OJS to any platform or vice versa, and if the journal is already DOAJ approved, is there any transition period until the DOAJ status is still valid, or will it be disbarred due to non-receipt of metadata during transition period?
So loading article metadata to DOAJ is voluntary. So we would never exclude your journal because you're not sending article metadata to us. We do like to be told in advance if a journal is either moving platform or moving publisher, and that sometimes means that it's going to change platform. And that's particularly because the articles that you have in DOAJ, they will have perhaps what is going to become an old or broken URL. And your articles are then sent throughout all the libraries all over the world that take our metadata. And so those broken links appear in that metadata. And then we get feedback from the libraries, from the discovery services, let's say EBSCO, and they say, oh, this article's broken. Do you know what's going on with this journal? Can you find me the new link? Can you send us the full text? So what we would like to know is if you know that your journal is going to be either changing platform, or if you know it's going to be moving to a different publisher and therefore get new URLs, we like to be told in advance. We appreciate that that isn't always possible. We won't exclude or withdraw a journal if we find out that links are broken. We always try to contact the journal, the account holder that we have connected to the journal in DOAJ. So perhaps, the most important thing to do first is always make sure that we've got an up-to-date name and email address in the DOAJ account. Unfortunately, it's those details that go out of date, because then if we send an email and say, hey, the links aren't working, we often then will delete the article metadata after a certain amount of time because we haven't heard back from that person, and that's usually because the email address is out of date. So really great question. I'd say really important for anyone who has a journal indexed in DOAJ is log into your account and make sure that the name and the email address are up to date. Thanks for a great question.
Thank you. Militz asked whether there is an ARC plugin. ARC is another type of persistent identifier, and I responded that there is already an ARC plugin.
But what about handles? This question comes from Craft-OA project.
I don't believe there is a handle registration plugin, and the ARC plugin, Irina, that you posted about, I can see one, but it doesn't look like it has been updated since 2021. So I'm not sure about the current status or compatibility of it. But if there is interest in developing a handle plugin or updating the ARC plugin, we'll always be to collaborate.
Thanks a lot, and yeah, we'll make sure that we'll follow up with ARC Alliance on this plugin status. Have we missed any questions? So there is one more question in the chat. Thanks for the presentation. Question, not in the chat, sorry, in the Q&A. Thanks for the presentation. Question for Dominic. We're a relatively new journal and have tried to register with DOAJ. We had a negative response, partly about the number of articles, fair enough, but also saying that we're too practitioner focused with too few academics on the editorial board. This seems to be a somewhat outdated view of how research is undertaken and by whom. Boundary spanners. Any comments or advice? Thanks.
Yes, so how can I answer this? We have our editorial criteria, our basic criteria, and there's one of the criteria is very specific about the editorial board and the information that you display in the editorial board and the composition of the editorial board. And those criteria are there mostly for historical reasons, and that is that I should say certainly when I joined DOAJ back in 2012, that's when there was this massive flourish of questionable journals, and one of the traits that we saw in questionable journals were these editorial boards that had just been composed of names harvested from the internet. So we started to put in place different types of requirements around the information that you must display, because that's a way for the journal to self-declare that it has a real and true operating editorial board. So the question around practitioners, I cannot answer that, but I will take that back to our new head of editorial, Matt Hodgkinson. He will, I'm sure I'll be able to, I don't know if I'll be able to find the journal. I mean, I don't know if this, I know that the question was asked anonymously. If you'd like to email me, then I will keep your name and details anonymous. If you want to share the ISSN of the journal with me some way, then I will gladly follow up. So I can't answer that sort of specific question because I'm not connected to the editorial side of things. But certainly we do have very strict requirements around the information that you display around the editorial board. And with the new head of editorial coming in, we're using this as an opportunity to review some of our criteria. So it'll be interesting to know about this practitioner problem. I'm sorry I can't give a more sort of a fuller answer.
Thank you so much. I think we've answered all the questions. Thank you so much, Dom, Mariya, and Milica, for organizing this webinar. It's very useful, as always. And thanks a lot for all the work that you are doing for the community. Thanks a lot, everyone, for attending. You will receive an email from me with links to slides and recording. Thanks a lot, and have a good day, evening.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for having us, and thank you for all the questions.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Everyone.